All right, more on this. Russia continuing to launch attacks on Ukraine, even as President Trump and European leaders are now pushing for peace. Ukraine says Russia launched 93 drones, 2 ballistic missiles into the country overnight. Let's bring in Republican Congressman Mike Lawler of New York. He serves on the Foreign Affairs and Financial Services Committee. Congressman, even as President Zelenskyy was sitting down with President Trump in the Oval on Monday, Putin was launching attacks and killing civilians inside Ukraine. When are world leaders going to believe what Putin is showing them, which is that he's never going to stop the killing?
Well, this is the problem with dealing with Vladimir Putin. He is a vile dictator and thug, and will stop at nothing to secure what he wants. And in this instance, obviously, large swaths of Ukraine. And he has made it clear he does not want Ukraine to be part of NATO. But this is a moment for resolute response by both the American government and our NATO and European allies. And it's part of the reason why, frankly, at the beginning of this war, more should have been done to enact crippling sanctions on Russia. More should have been done by the Europeans to stop purchasing Russian gas, and more should have been done by the Biden administration to make sure that Ukraine had the weapons and the ability to use them up front. But now, 3 years on, we are in a situation where a negotiated end to this war is necessary. And in the absence of that, if Putin refuses to agree to a ceasefire, if he refuses to agree to a peace deal, then the United States and our European allies must enact secondary sanctions on Russia, cripple their oil network, and support Ukraine further with military aid and assistance.
Which it sounds like President Trump is, very much actively thinking about this week. He said so a couple of times. Take a look at this latest Gallup poll. Pretty interesting information here. This is Ukrainians, civilians' perspective on the Russian invasion. Back in 2022, when asked if they wanted to negotiate an end to the war ASAP versus fight until Ukraine wins, it was 22 to 73%. Today, that essentially has flipped. You've got 69% of Ukrainians want a negotiated end to this war immediately. Only 24% say that they want to fight on until they win this kinetically. I mean, they've lost 14,000 civilians, 70,000 troops. How much suffering can one population of people take?
Well, that obviously is the cost of war. I mean, it brings death and destruction. And in the case of the Ukrainian people, has torn their country apart. And Russia is solely responsible for this war. And so obviously the objective is to end it, to provide a peace deal that will stop the killing, which is what President Trump has said from the very beginning. He wants to stop the killing. He wants to stop the war. Obviously, as you work through a negotiation, we want to ensure Ukraine's structural sovereignty. We do not want Russia to succeed in its objectives. But there has to be a negotiation. And I think the Ukrainian people, clearly, if you look at these numbers, want this conflict to come to an end. I think the vast majority of Americans want to see this conflict come to a swift end. We are not looking to send U.S. troops into Ukraine. And so in the absence of that, you need a negotiated peace settlement. And that's really where I think most of the world stands at this point.
Real quick, how much longer do you think President Trump should give Putin to carry on with the slaughter before he does levy those sanctions?
I think Putin should have a very short window to agree to a ceasefire and then negotiate a peace settlement. I think it was a positive step that Vladimir Putin met with President Trump, and then subsequently President Zelenskyy and European leaders came to the White House and had a meeting. I thought that was a positive step forward. But this should move swiftly, given the fact that we have had these meetings, and I would suspect in the next few weeks this should be resolved.
Well, a lot of people across the world hoping that that is the case. Sir, thank you for taking time with us today. Always enjoy speaking with you.
Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelenskyy said he wants a strong reaction from the U.S. government if Russian President Vladimir Putin does not sit down with him for a bilateral meeting. This comes as U.S. President Donald Trump is seeking to broker a peace agreement between the two countries, which have been at war since Moscow's February 2022 invasion of Ukraine, although Trump has conceded that Putin may not be prepared to make a deal. Zelenskyy has said he has already agreed to a proposed meeting with Putin. I responded immediately to the proposal for a bilateral meeting. We are ready. But what if the Russians are not ready? Zelenskyy said at a news briefing in Kyiv Wednesday. If the Russians are not ready, we would like to see a strong reaction from the United States. Trump separately met with both leaders in the past week, with Zelenskyy visiting the White House, along with other European leaders earlier this week, and the U.S. president meeting Putin in Alaska last week. The White House has said Putin was willing to meet with his Ukrainian foe after a phone call this week with Trump. President Trump spoke with President Putin by phone, and he agreed to begin the next phase of the peace process, a meeting between President Putin and President Zelenskyy, which would be followed, if necessary, by a trilateral meeting between President Putin, President Zelenskyy, and President Trump, White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told reporters on Tuesday. The path toward peace between the two sides remains uncertain, despite U.S. efforts for diplomacy, as the U.S. government and its allies attempt to work out potential security guarantees for Ukraine. Zelenskyy said it was unclear what concessions about territory Russia was willing to make to end the conflict. Trump has previously said Kyiv and Moscow would both need to cede territory. To discuss what Ukraine is willing to do, let's first hear what Russia is willing to do, Zelenskyy said. We do not know that.